After 5 long years, we are finally getting Xenoblade 3, which was revealed by series director Tetsuya Takahashi to be a continuation of both Xenoblade 1 and 2's stories. So, my wife and I wanted to take a look at this trailer bit by bit to talk about what it tells us about the game, because this trailer is chock full of references, symbolism, and foreshadowing that's so easy to miss. So if you haven't played any of the Xenoblade games and you don't want to get spoiled, then I highly recommend that you click off this video right now and go play them. And if you're a fan of Xenoblade, then make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it everywhere if you want to see more Xenoblade content coming from this channel. So to start out, in this opening scene, we get our first look at Noah, one of the game's protagonists, as he's playing a flute, which likely has to do with his role as an off-seer for the land of Keves, one of the 2 nations present in the world of Aionios. And while at first glance, this just seems to be a beautiful and mysterious opening scene, if you look closely at this flute, you'll notice that it has an intricate pattern on it that looks strikingly similar to Zanza's wings at the end of the first Xenoblade. This is relevant because while we don't necessarily know exactly what an off-seer does, we do learn from an article on Nintendo's website that essentially it's a person who mourns for soldiers who've lost their lives on the battlefield. And if I had to take a guess, I would imagine that it's Noah's role to help the ether of his fallen companions to flow back into the world and continue the cycle of life and death. This is important to note because it's been revealed that the central theme of this game is life. So moving forward, we see the Keves military, which Nintendo's website describes as being a nation where mechanical technology was developed. Their armies are comprised of units consisting mainly of combat vehicles, and they use units of small mobile weapons operated by soldiers riding them. And we can see that they have a very Xenoblade Chronicles X-inspired look to them. They haven't confirmed any tangible connection to X though, like they have with 1 or 2. So I don't want to dig into that too much, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that one of their war machines appears to be made from a repurposed face mechon, which illustrates to us the idea that they do not rely on ether energy, but instead they use the technological advancements of the Machia, High-Entia, and the Homs to bolster their military might. And Noah's sword in particular is fascinating because it looks like a double-edged version of the Monado that Shulk had made in Future Connected, mixed kinda with Pyra's sword from Xenoblade 2. I think that it's hard to deny that because his weapon is distinct to the majority of the other soldiers of Keves, and he appears to be one of the primary protagonists, this weapon has to have some kind of plot significance moving forward. I'm just not sure what yet. And we see him fighting another off-seer from Agnus named Mio, a Gormati woman who bears a striking resemblance to Nia from Xenoblade 2, all the way down to her weapons of choice being chakrams. And in addition to this, based on the appearance of her core crystal, Mio is a flesh eater, which I'm shocked is still occurring in the world today. I mean, I suppose she could just be an existing flesh eater that we just never ran into in Xenoblade 2, but I don't know. I'm not convinced.
And speaking of Mio, let's go over some name symbolism for these 2 protagonists. Noah's name may remind you of the story of Noah's Ark from the Bible, which wouldn't be surprising since the Xeno series is known for loving biblical references. His name may also be a reference to Project Noah from Xenogears, which was a planned project to create a god and also the working project name for Xenogears. His name could also be a reference to the No Can or No Flute, which is a bamboo flute that symbolized calling gods down to the visible human world. Mio, on the other hand, means cherry blossom, and you can see a cherry blossom design on her outfit in the trailer. In Hanakotoba, the Japanese flower symbolism, cherry blossoms represent the impermanent nature of life. They mean birth and death, beauty and violence, the fragility of life, and how it's tragically short-lived.
And so as we see a battle between our 2 main trios continue, there's just a lot to point out here. I think it's very plausible that this battle in particular takes place in the corpse of Uriah based on the red foliage around them as they fight. Also, I think it's interesting how the energy that powers both sides' weapons have distinctly different colorations, with Keves leaning more into the blues from the Machina technology, and Agnes leaning more towards the green ether energy, as can be seen both in this scene as well as in these screenshots.
Color seems to play an important role in the distinction between Keves and Agnes. Like John was saying, Keves uses blue for Machina tech and Agnes uses green ether. Members of the Keves military are all dressed in black, whereas members of Agnes lean towards white. While it may seem like a black versus white, green versus blue situation, this is Xenoblade and nothing is ever that simple. In traditional Japanese color theory, there were only 4 colors: black, white, red, and ao. Starting with black, it has a variety of meanings that changed throughout the years due to Western influence, but it's most notably associated with mourning. White, although now used as a symbol for purity, was initially worn only at funerals and is also a symbol of mourning. These two colors that seem to be opposites really just mean the same thing: mourning life that is lost. Similarly, ao is the traditional word used for both blue and green. In early Japan, they viewed green as a shade of blue. So although it seems like the people of Keves and Agnes oppose one another, I believe that the color theory behind black, white, and ao means that they're really more alike than different, which was a theme from previous Xeno titles as well.
Something that I'm particularly curious about, though, is these tattoos that everyone has. Because you can easily see that everyone from Keves has these tattoos very visibly on their bodies, and my first thought was simply that this is just a Keves thing, right? Well, it doesn't seem to be that simple. If you look closely at Mio's character art, we can see that she also has this strange tattoo on her neck, but we can't see it on either of her companions. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not there, though. And so with us seeing so many characters introduced in such a short period of time, I just want to do a quick character roundup. We obviously have Noah and Mio, but we also have Lanz, who appears to be descended from the Machina and has a massive sword that doubles as a shield. We have Eunie, who's partially Hyentia, as is indicated by the smaller wings on her head, just like Melia, who is only half Hyentia, and she wields a staff sniper combo deal, combining Melia and Sharla's weapons from the first game into one awesome looking package. We then have Taion, or at least that's how I think you pronounce his name, a tactician from Agnes who uses these cool looking origami bird things that whenever I see them, I can't not think about the Disney short movie Paperman. And finally, Sena, who is a blade who seemingly does not have a driver, at least one that's not immediately apparent in this trailer, which raises the question, do blades still need drivers in this world? And I think it's also worth noting that her core crystal and her blue fiery hair are loosely reminiscent of Bridget's design. I would be surprised if there were actually any real relation there, but I don't know, I thought it was kind of cool. And then we get to this point in the trailer that I have on screen right now, and oh my goodness. I've seen a lot of people already theorizing as to who this is, saying things like Zeke, Rex, but I personally feel very confident that this is a resurrected Vandham. Now, admittedly, he doesn't look that Orion anymore, but the fact remains that he has exactly the same scar, he has exactly the same hair, and when he's shown on screen, Vandham's voice actor, Simon Thorpe, is actively speaking in the trailer. And I think that Vandham, or at least this iteration of Vandham, being in this game leads into some of the more interesting aspects of the game, and that is the cyclical nature of life. If we move forward in the trailer, we hear Melia, and yes, this is definitely Melia. Not only does it look and sound like her, but her voice actress, Jenna Coleman, essentially spoiled the fact that Monolith Soft were probably working on this game, like, last year. But she says that the ouroboros abhor the world. And if you're not familiar with an ouroboros, the Encyclopedia Britannica describes it as being an emblematic serpent of ancient Egypt and Greece that is represented with its tail in its mouth, continually devouring itself and being reborn from itself. And as a Gnostic and alchemical symbol, ouroboros expresses the unity of all things, material and spiritual, which never disappear but perpetually change form, potentially just like Vandham, in an eternal cycle of destruction and recreation. Now, if you look at each of the main characters' weapons in the art that they've revealed, you will see that many of them actually have this symbol represented somewhere on these weapons. If we are to tie together the ideas that the off-seers like Noah and Mio can see off the spirits of the dead, allowing their ether to return to the world, then I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Vandham may have been reborn or resurrected back into this world by some means, whether naturally or artificially. In Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Vandham has a line where he says, "As long as you're alive, you're in the war." And this parallels the opening lines of this trailer so incredibly well. And so moving forward past this scene with Vandham, we see several more people playing flutes in front of a crowd of people. However, the ether cubes rising into the air are gold this time, instead of the blue we see when Noah plays his flute. And the central guy in this scene playing his flute is interesting for a number of reasons. A, because the marking on his hand is slightly different from anyone else's we've seen up to this point, with there being much more red than anyone else's, with Noah's, Lanz's, and Eunie's all by comparison only having the center bit of it red. But for this blonde-haired kid, it's also entirely on our left, his right. And I'm sure that these marks have some in-game explanation, but at this point, I just really have no idea. And this guy is also really interesting because it looks like he could possibly be a descendant of Shulk and Fiora. Or maybe he's just a blonde anime boy and I'm reading too much into that bit. Next we see Mio and Noah playing their flutes together. However, it appears that they, for whatever reason, have traded flutes, as Mio is playing the flute that Noah was playing at the beginning of the game, and that Mini Shulk and company were playing just moments ago.
And flutes are everywhere in this trailer, which Takahashi noted in his interview with Nintendo, stating, "The flute is actually one of the key themes in this game. Flutes have a range of meanings. I mentioned the no-can flute earlier, but since Xenoblade is known for loving biblical references, let's see what the Bible says too. In the Bible, flutes are often used in funerals due to their emotive sound. In Matthew chapter 9, verses 23 to 26, flute players were ready to mourn for a little girl who passed away, but Jesus turned them away, took the little girl by the hand, and resurrected her, saying, 'The girl is not dead, but sleeping.' It'll be interesting to see which role the flute takes in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Will it send people to the afterlife, or will it work toward resurrecting a god?"
And since Ali was talking about color palettes before, we need to mention that the flute Noah is playing in this next scene is much more similar to the Agnes color palette, and in addition to this, it has a red ribbon with 3 loops hanging off of it, which we have seen all over Xenoblade 2 on characters like Nia, Laura, and most similarly Adam, just further illustrating that these people and their culture, even down to their aesthetics and the ribbons they hang off their flute, have clearly descended from the characters that we know and love from previous games. I also think it's worth noting that the clothing of everyone in Keves is very reminiscent of Shulk's clothes from Future Connected, all the way down to everyone having these same belts, which generally just boils down to the fact that all the technological influences born after the first Xenoblade game have been maintained and expanded upon. Now, going back to the main 6 characters that we're getting to know, we see Eunie and Taion seemingly battling each other, and what Taion says is very interesting, assuming he's actually speaking to Eunie and it's not a bait and switch, because this idea that people are no longer your friends on the Keves side, and they are actually just being used as fuel, is very reminiscent to what happened to the Homs in Xenoblade 1, as they were being absorbed by Xen stanza into the Bionis. And then we are treated to some absolutely beautiful scenery in the game with Vandham narrating over the top of the footage. And here we see some familiar sights with Noah running over the metal scaffolding at the distant fingers from Xenoblade 1, with the corpse of Uriah in the background, and many of the other characters running around varied terrains that if these are callbacks, you'll need to tell me because I suck at recognizing environments. This next bit confused me a lot. There's something to do with filling up clocks. I wonder if maybe they need to fill up clocks almost like vessels in order to maintain the military might of their respective nations, but now they need to destroy these clocks? I'm not quite sure, but it appears as though Mio is working with Noah to destroy an Agnes war machine for whatever reason. And this leads us to get the final reveal of the trailer, that both Melia and Nia are what appears to be the leaders of their respective nations. And while the mask Melia is wearing is definitely customary of her own people, the one that Nia's wearing makes me wonder if the two cultures were friendly at one point, even sharing ideas and resources, but at one point had a falling out that leads to this constant, endless fighting. This would make sense because these two civilizations genuinely have more in common than would initially meet the eye. In the Hebrew language, Keves means lamb, while in Latin, Agnus also means lamb. This, when paired with the idea that Ali had discussed earlier that black and white have essentially the same meaning when it comes to mourning, and even that blue and green were once considered to be the same color, just different shades in Japan, shows us that these civilizations are two sides of the same coin. They all were subjects of Klaus at one point in time, and so this notion that they are all lambs makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons. First is that with this ceaseless fighting, they, like Jesus in the Bible, have become lambs of God, sacrificing themselves in this constant conflict so that one day their lands may flourish. But this in turn makes everyone who dies for their nation a sacrificial lamb in this endless cycle of war. Just like Ouroboros represents rebirth, even the name of the world they live in, Aionios, represents this endless cycle, as this literally means that without beginning and end, that which always has been and always will be. And while we don't know why these two have come to blows, I would imagine that it comes down to insurmountable ideological differences that I feel would just naturally come with the territory when a god is killed and his last act is to bring together two very distinctly different universes that he created and abused in very different ways. And these two nations overcame him and his actions in their own individual ways, and therefore their own individual strengths collide. And finally, the trailer ends with Noah and Mio overlooking the ruins of the Mechonis' sword and the Orion corpse. And finally, the logo appears. And this logo almost seems to be fading away, similarly to how ether may fade away when an off-seer plays their flute. And I can't help but notice that the 3 has the same design as these mysterious tattoos within it, really leaning into the fact that these are going to be important in some way, shape, or form. And that's all we could find in this trailer. And I'm sure we missed loads. So if there's anything that you saw that we didn't, please let us know in the comment section down below. And more than anything, if you enjoyed this video, please share it wherever you like sharing things, whether it be Twitter, Reddit, Discord, or anywhere else, because it will help us to see whether or not you would want to see more breakdowns like these coming from this channel. And if you want to talk more about Xenoblade 3, use the link in the description to join our Discord server. As always, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. We will see you in the next video. Later.
See ya!